You ready for this? All right. The statements issued by hosts, co-hosts, guests, and anyone else appearing on the show do not reflect the stance of the College of New Jersey or the NJDOE OSE. Please use your professional judgment when implementing strategies and resources within your practice. Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of the TCNJ AT Talks podcast. Hey there, listeners. Brian from the future here. I just said that this was episode 3 when in actuality it's episode 4. We ended up recording an episode out of order. Hope that clears everything up. We are the podcast that is affiliated with the Assistive Technology Center at TCNJ, and we're here to inform, educate, and empower listeners about assistive technology. My name is Brian Kenyon.
And I'm Madison Braunstein.
And thanks for tuning back in. So let's get right into it. We have another question this week from the mailbag. The first one is from Joey. Hi, my name is Joey, and I'm a special education teacher for a first grade student who is nonverbal. We've been using some basic picture cards and signs, but I know he has so much more to say. My team and I believe he's ready for high-tech AAC system, but we're completely overwhelmed by the number of apps and devices available. How do we even begin the process of choosing the right one? What are the most important first steps in matching a student with the right communication technology? So I'm going to give this one to you, to Madison, because this is your area of expertise way more than mine.
Well, thank you so much, Joey, for submitting your question. As Brian said, I'm an SLP and my specialty is AAC. I would first look at all of the team that's involved in supporting this student. So really have the whole team involved in this process. And, this trial process is not necessarily needs to happen quickly, or, you need to find the right app right away. So to just kind of go into it with that approach and look at, as we're going to talk about the SET framework, looking at really the student's needs, the environment that the student is in, and what you want the student to do. Obviously, communicate. And AAC is not a one-size-fits-all process, and you can look at different tools from light tech to mid tech to high tech, really just looking at the student and all of the factors that go into this process.
And we were just talking about that before. High tech AAC can be very expensive, and a lot of them are going to subscription models. What do you think about that? Like, how can we test out different apps? Because the only one I know, the one that I'm familiar with, I shouldn't know of, but I'm familiar with, is Proluquo to Go. And so that's the one that I have and I've used before, but I know there's so many more out there. Like, how can we test them out with the student, even if we don't have them yet?
Yeah, so I know, like, having, like you were saying, having that number of apps can be really overwhelming. And I think just, first thing is like becoming more familiar and educating yourself about what's out there, really looking at, what's out there. As an SLP, there are certain apps that you can obtain a license for free for yourself. So that would be great, to do that, to have those available to trial with the student. What you were saying about the subscription, at different apps, transitioning to the subscription model, that's kind of a hot topic, something that's really being discussed, because, should you have to subscribe to have a voice, to pay every month, as opposed to having that one-time fee for that app, and never paying again. And, these are businesses at the end of the day. So it's really, it is a conversation, that is being had. And there are definitely concerns.
I understand why they go to the subscription models, because they have to keep up these apps. And so they're spending time updating, adding, and I know they might not change that much over time, but they will change with the iPad or with the device that they're on. So I understand the subscription model, but I also understand why people want to pay one time for my voice.
Right, exactly.
And maybe we'll even talk about that a little later. The voice that you can get, you can use iPhones and iPads now. It's a little different, but you can have your own voice, right? There's what's it called? My Voice in
Personal voice.
Personal voice.
Yeah, it's part of Apple's accessibility features. Yeah, that's something that's really cool, and has a lot of potential for maybe people who might use you know speech sometimes to communicate and might want to use their device for the another portion of the time. You do have to train the model with your speech, and it takes about a day to process all that information, and it makes you a voice that sounds like your spoken voice. It's interesting. It definitely has a lot of potential, and you could think about not just children, but maybe the adult population, for something like ALS for like voice banking, how that feature is so readily available and accessible to people. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's something like you have to train it on like 150 or
Yeah,
200 phrases that they have built in, right?
right.
And I guess it makes you use all the syllables and all that kind of stuff in order for them to create a full picture or a full sound of your voice,
Right.
right?
And I do think, it's still something that could be improved. I know I did my own voice, and when I tried it out with a particular AAC app, I know some of the, like the word I was coming through, it sounded kind of glitchy. So, there's definitely some troubleshooting and development to continue to be had with that.
Cool, cool. All right. Next question. This one comes from Ross. I'm a case manager for a middle school, and our team often struggles with writing effective and measurable IEP goals for AT. We either write the goal about the tool itself, for example, the student will use the laptop, or we're too vague. Can you provide some examples or a formula for writing a strong, data-driven AT goal that focuses on the student's actual progress? I used to be a big culprit of making my goals too vague, thinking it would be good that you made that goal vague, so then it would be all encompassing, and then they would learn everything, right? But I pretty much figured that out pretty quickly that that's not good, and so and it makes it hard to measure. So usually the way I make my goals, and more specifically my objectives, is I write the task I want the student to complete and how I'm going to measure it. So I usually use something like verbal prompts depending on the student I'm using. So one example would be Andrew will learn the steps to scan his document into his note-taking app. That's a goal, right? And then the benchmarks or the objectives for that. Andrew will hold the iPad or rest it on a stand in preparation to scan the document with no more than 2 verbal prompts. Another one would be Andrew will choose the scan documents option with no more than 3 verbal prompts. And usually I do that, I use in 4 out of 5 trials, 80% of the time, something like that. And so now it's measurable. When I ask Andrew to put his, start scanning a document, Andrew, put your iPad on the stand. He puts it there, or he doesn't, right? Or if I have to tell him, Andrew, make sure you choose the scan documents option when you're in the scan app, right? Either he doesn't or he doesn't. So now these are now measurable for me. And then when I'm choosing the number of at least verbal prompts for myself, I usually think of how well the student can normally complete a new task, and so or the amount of steps involved in that one singular objective or that benchmark, and then how hard the actual task that I'm asking to complete. Now, what are the steps? What are the things like that? So that's how I do it. Madison, do you have a little different idea
Yeah.
or?
I mean, those are great. I usually, when I write goals, I use the SMART formula. So that's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So kind of just like jumping off of what you were saying, really make sure you're hitting all those bases because you want it to be something that you can, provide that data on and see if you've met that goal, for sure. So, and, I know in terms of IEP goals specifically, putting it in that timeline of the academic year. So, starting in one academic year, student will do this with this kind of support in this environment, something along those lines. But
Perfect.
definitely in that smart format. And I think too often, people who work in a public school, whether that be educators, related service providers, anyone who's generating these goals for the IEP, sometimes it's hard to fit in that time to generate really good goals. There's so much paperwork and such that you're doing on top of your job of being in that student facing environment. So, you know, we talk a little bit about how AI is helping in the field of AAC and also assistive technology. But you know, you could even generate a goal and plug it into that ChatGPT and say, hey, how can I make this better? And just compare your goal to that goal that the AI is providing you with. So I think that's a good way to use those kind of tools to help you.
Cool. And you made a good point. Goals, or at least I pulled this point from what we were just talking about. They're transferable amongst students. So you might have a similar goal for another student, but usually you're going to make it specific to that student, right? So you might have to change it. So then it makes, you know, if I have 20 IEPs with 20 different students and each one has 10 goals with 3 benchmarks in it, that's a lot of benchmarks I'm writing for each one. So I like the use of AI to help me at least suss out what I'm trying to get the point to, right?
Right. Not just saying like, hey, AI, write me all these goals, do my work for me. But no, how can I make this better? This is my situation. This is what I want the student to do. Using those tools to just help refine your goals a little bit.
Perfect. Exactly. All right, cool. Now we're going to get to know Maddie a little better today. Let's start at the beginning. So tell us a little about what led you to become a speech language pathologist. I'm going to say SLP from now on just because I trip over my words. So tell us a little bit about what led you to become an SLP. What first sparked your interest in this field?
Yeah, so I actually had kind of an untraditional path to becoming an SLP. I graduated college with a degree in graphic design. I worked for a few years in that field, decided maybe I wanted to do something where I was helping people. I didn't feel like I was doing enough of that, and that's something that's really important to me. So I thought that I wanted to be an English teacher, actually, but I determined that there would be a better path for me being an SLP. And I went back to school to be an SLP, to graduate school. Had to take some prerequisite courses since my background was not in SLP. Graduated, and I moved to New York City and began working in a school for autistic children, a middle high school. And I really enjoyed that. And I got a little bit of AAC experience there, but I really didn't have any like mentorship. So I didn't really know what I was doing there. I then had worked, I started working at this school for kids with complex communication needs in the city called iHope, an amazing school. And I really gained a lot of my experience working there. When I first started working there, the amount of information and training was quite overwhelming, but I really just learned so much in my time there. And while I was there, I went on to study for my ATP exam, and I received my ATP certificate, and really just kicked off from there, in the specific world of assistive technology and AAC. Knew that I wanted to be in that specific field, and after that, I moved back to New Jersey and worked at a public school district. Worked with a number of students who used AAC, and now I'm here.
That's cool. Did you have any experience with AAC or speech language SLPs prior? Because you said you were an English teacher, you wanted to become an English teacher, and then you decided to become an SLP. Like, what made that jump from English teacher to SLP?
I think mostly English teacher was, I really like to read in my free time, and I like to read classic literature and stuff. So that was more of just a passion there. And I felt like, the aspects of language development and how, that can coincide with literacy development sparked my interest in how I can take those passions and go into a different field. A friend of my mom's was an SLP, so I observed her and her practice and decided that that's what I wanted to do.
That's really cool. Cool. Next question. You've worked in some really diverse settings, from IHOPE, the specialized school for children with brain-based disorders, to public school districts. How have these different environments shaped your approach to providing assistive technology and AAC solutions?
Yeah, so really interesting assortment of experiences. iHope is a very specialized environment, and we have a lot of resources at our fingertips when it comes to AAC, whether that be like relationships with these representatives from these device companies such as Tobii Dynavox, PRC, et cetera. And having all those resources readily available, lots of different devices to trial, money that came back to the school from events that would be used to buy assistive technology. And then going to the public school, I really got to see, an environment that maybe like doesn't have as many specific resources for that, but being able to use my knowledge and expertise to help provide that district with more tools that they can use and knowledge and training in district for the students and help them meet their needs.
That's really cool. Yeah, that must have been tough, going from the specialized school where you have probably anything you need to a public school district where you can get anything you need, but you don't have to test out right off the get go, right?
Right, and also like when I was working in the city at iHope, my caseload was very small, so I could really provide in depth, planning and training and just energy towards getting these students what they needed. And moving to a public school district, my caseload, tripled, quadrupled. And, you're working in a public school, you're stretched a little more thin. And, at least in my specific experience. And I think that really gave me perspective for everyone who works in both private and public schools and the knowledge and resources that are available to each. And, just thinking about how we can make that better in a public school setting.
Yeah, cool. All right, next question. You recently earned your ATP, Assistive Technology Professional Certification 2024. What was the process like, and what motivated you to pursue that certification?
Yeah, so I had a couple friends and colleagues at iHope who had their ATP, and since I started working there, I knew I was like, this is a goal of mine. This is what I want to do. I want to get this certificate. So yeah, kind of just looking at, my work at the school compiled the hours that I needed to, to satisfy that part of the ATP requirement. And I actually had a friend who we took the test together. We studied together, which was really fun. And when I took the test, we, kind of study on this comprehensive basis of experience, but the test is not always what you study, as with any test. And it was interesting how, the test spoke to a lot of seating and positioning and OT and PT related things, which is good because a lot of my knowledge base at the time was in SLP, AAC specific tools, maybe some switch access, a little bit of mounting, but just, having studied all that information gave me a good basis of what I needed to know for the exam.
That's cool. Cool. All right. So this is something I've always wanted to know. And so this can be about your expertise and how you do things. Could you walk us through the process of, and tell us what this is too, because some people may not know what it is, writing a letter of medical necessity for a speech generating device, And then what are the components you need to include to successfully advocate for a child and their family?
Yeah. So a letter of medical necessity, that sounds super jargony, but it's basically an insurance evaluation to obtain a speech generating device, through insurance or Medicaid, depending on your funding sources, that the family has. And this, I think the biggest misconception here, when you hear like AAC eval, is like that it can be done in like a single sitting or a single session, which is far from the truth. This is like a multi-month long process where you trial different devices with a student and obtain data that you put in your report to justify why that specific device works best for the student depending on their needs. And really starting this process by inviting this whole team to be a part of the conversation. That's the parents, the teacher, if the student has other related services provided like OT, PT, if they have a TVI, a teacher of the visually impaired, a hearing specialist, those would all be members of the team that would be important to making that decision about what the best solution for this student would be. So definitely involving that whole team, letting everybody know throughout the whole process, not just at the beginning. And then, they typically want you to trial like at least 3. And you may be able to rule out one without trialing by giving a justification. So a lot of your eval is justifying why this tool worked for the specific child's needs versus this other tool. And also including any accessories that the child might need to be able to use this device, whether that be like a key guard, if they're a specific access method, whether this is an eye gaze device, whether this is the student needs eye gaze, whether the student needs maybe head tracking, or the student accesses via switches. So it's definitely like a lengthy whole justification about what looking at the student's needs and how they communicate in different environments. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the SET framework, but really thinking about that throughout the whole process, because it's not just about the tool. It's about where is the student using it? Who are they using it with? How are they using it? What environments can it go to? And the importance of, say you're getting a high-tech AAC device, also having maybe a light-tech version of that device in case the battery dies, or having different ways for the student to communicate in different environments is important to think about, not just, when you're getting what what you're looking for this letter of medical necessity.
Cool. Good. In your professional journey, you've seen a lot of AT. Are there any solutions that you find surprise you with their versatility or impact across different disabilities?
Yeah. So kind of just what I was talking about, the importance of those light tech tools and how they often get overlooked. I feel like when people hear the word assistive technology or even AAC, they think, oh, like an iPad with an app or something in the high tech realm. But just like really echoing the importance of the lower light tech tools and how that might be the best option for a certain student. Like if you think about people who access AAC by scanning, partner assisted scanning, and like I was saying before about a backup, having that light tech communication board or symbols available, maybe when the child is swimming in a therapy pool or, doing something with a messy, like art activity or something.
You don't want an iPad or a $5,000 device getting wet or.
I mean, that's what we have insurance warranties for,
right.
But they do lapse at some point, and right. You don't want to go through that, and just having communication available everywhere for the student.
Cool. What excites you most about being a part of this podcast. Well, and what you're doing at the AT Center at TCNJ.
Yeah. Honestly, podcasting was never something that I thought that I would do, but I'm a spontaneous person and I like to try new things. So I'm excited about just having conversations with people and having interesting guests on the podcast. And I think by having the conversation, we're welcoming like innovative thought and just different perspectives. And I think it makes information more accessible to people because it's just a conversation, like we were saying.
Yeah.
And what excites me about my work at the AT Center? Everything.
I put you on the spot there.
I can't think of one particular thing. I just love talking about AT and AAC, and I could talk for hours about it. And I love helping support people and providing them with tools and, not only that initial training, but that carryover. And, we don't want device abandonment. So really checking in with people regarding how the tool is working, if we need to rethink anything, if we need to think about different environments, different factors that we didn't initially consider. I think that's really important.
Cool. I think I have an idea what you might come up with here, but I don't know. What do you see as the most significant emerging trends or innovations in the world of AAC and AT?
So we were kind of touching on it before, but I think there are a lot of really great applications for AI and how that can help people who maybe need support doing things otherwise, how it can increase their independence. So really excited about that.
I keep saying this. AI 6 months ago, I would have steered clear of, but it's like all of a sudden it is very available and accessible too. That's the other thing I'm seeing with it. So anyone can use it. It's not just for someone who knows how to write the perfect prompt or anything like that. It can be created for anyone. So I love the idea.
And we hope that it stays that way.
Yeah. And then here's the last one. What do you hope listeners, whether they're teachers, parents, therapists, service providers, will take away from our conversations on this podcast and just in general from your work at the AT Center?
Like I was saying before, just that the information that could help them is easily accessible, not gate kept. As an SLP, I think sometimes what we do and the intricacies, ins and outs of it, might be gate kept, and I don't want to do that.
Yes.
I want to help people learn about what's at their fingertips, what's available, and that includes other SLPs who might not have as much expertise in the area of AAC and AT.
Cool. That's cool. And yeah, I've never felt like it was gate kept, but the world of AAC and SLP has always not been mystified for me, but I've not always understood everything. And I think this conversations with you has really like we've talked about AAC, and it's kind of like, oh, this is a lot not simpler, but more straightforward than I thought it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like looking at just anyone who supports someone who communicates using AAC, we want that information to not be intimidating. We want training on how to use different programs and facilitate communication, how to model that information to be at some point second nature to professionals who support kids who use AAC.
Good. All right. So we're going to have 2 rounds of rapid fire questions. The first are going to be a little more fun, and these are pretty much the same. I did add a question because you just talked about something.
Okay.
These are the same questions I asked Vanessa in the previous podcast. And then the second will be about AAC assistive technology. And they'll be similar to the ones, but I made them AAC based for you.
Got it.
All right. So coffee or tea?
Ooh, coffee.
Okay. Beach or mountain vacation?
Mountains.
Cool. What do you like to do in the mountains?
I like to hike. I went to 2 years ago, I went to Mount Rainier, which was incredible. I really like to travel in general. And then actually this past summer, we went to the like Italian Alps, which was incredible. So I'm definitely a mountain person. Not that I don't like beaches. I love beaches too, but
Did you climb when you were in the Italian Alps? Did you climb Zugspitze?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
No.
because I remember I was there many years ago, and I remember that. But
It wasn't like a mountain specific trip. We just went on like one or two hikes, but yeah.
cool. Sweet or savory snacks?
Ooh, savory.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Ooh, that one's hard. It's hard because I have a dog and I have two cats. But I guess I would have to say cats.
Okay. What are your cats' names?
I have a tortoiseshell cat named Maggie,
Okay.
short for Magnolia, and a black cat named Wanda.
Cool. What's Wanda? Is Wanda for anything special?
She came with that name.
Oh.
I just liked it. Yeah.
Okay. And what's your dog's name?
His name's Clyde.
Okay. Was that another one that you chose, or
No, he also came with that name, but it fits his personality. So,
Cool. What's your favorite season?
fall.
Why?
I would say I really like when the leaves change. It's also my birthday. I also love Halloween. So, all of those things.
I would say Halloween is like the number one best holiday of the year.
I agree with that.
Yes.
I agree with that.
And it's also that introduction. I think I talked about this last time with Vanessa. It's that introduction into like the holiday season. You got
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, you got all the other great holidays.
Definitely
Christmas,
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
My favorite holiday, I would
Yes.
say.
Yes, I agree. And we put up our, I don't know about you guys. We actually we'll have our stuff up in like middle of September. Some of the Halloween stuff.
Halloween
starts
should
going
be 2 months. September and October.
up. Good. I like it.
Putting that petition in now.
Call or text?
Ooh. Call for people I know and text maybe for people I don't know.
You're not as familiar with.
Yeah, like if I'm having a long conversation, call. And I guess.
Do you ever use those voice memos with people where you speak in? Yes.
I do. Yeah. And that's good for if someone sends me a long text message and I'm like, I am not going to text you back. I'm going to talk into the into the phone and send it. So.
Cool. Favorite book or favorite author?
Ooh, that's hard because I do really like to read. I would say Kurt Vonnegut
Okay.
for author, and I can't really pick a book.
All right, that's fine. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, I go back and forth with this one, I feel like. I feel like flying would be really cool. But I also see how like invisibility could be cool.
Where would you fly to?
Ooh, where would I fly to? I feel like I would just see things from a different perspective that, maybe like mountains and stuff.
Yeah, to the top. That'd be
Yeah.
cool. All right, so these all right, that's our first rapid fire. Those are more fun. These are going to be more ATAC related. And they're similar to the ones I asked Vanessa from last week, but I made them AAC based. So, one tool you can't live without for productivity.
Ooh, probably Google Calendar, because it reminds me all the stuff I have to do.
Is that good or bad?
It's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Favorite low-tech AAC solution?
I would say symbols or a core communication board. And then we love a pod book also, a light tech pod book. Pod stands for Pragmatic Organization Dynamic Display. And it is a, AAC system that is available in light, low tech, and also in high tech.
Cool. Biggest myth about AAC?
Biggest myth. That AAC, if your child does have some verbal language, that AAC will deter the development of verbal language. So that is a myth.
Why is that? Why is that? Not is that a myth, but why doesn't that deter verbal language?
Yeah, so it's just providing the child with more opportunities to communicate in different ways. You think about parents who teach their kids sign language and how that helps early language development. It's symbolic representation of language, and yeah.
Cool. One thing every educator or parent will say should know about AAC.
I mean, I would echo what we were just talking about, that it doesn't deter a child's language development. I also think that, there are plenty of low cost and free AAC solutions available. And you can start with a Light Tech core board. And, if you're in that evaluation process, there are free options available for you to trial, like while you're waiting to get a dedicated device or software for your student.
Yeah. Most exciting recent AAC innovation you've seen?
So we were kind of talking about AI before. We were looking into, here at the AT Center, we were doing a little bit of research into how AI can help support and aid people who use AAC. And something that was actually a study through McGill University in Canada. I believe the app is called Click AAC. I'm not totally positive.
Cool.
But they are using AI to have the user input a photo or upload a photo, and it would generate a core display of core and fringe vocabulary and sentences based on that picture, which I think is so cool.
That's really cool. And did it matter if the picture? Do you know? And I might be putting on the spot here. Did it matter if the picture was simple or complex? Like, was it able to do more with a complex image versus a simple image, or didn't matter?
I think it had like a range of what it could do. Yeah, I think that you'd have to test the specific capabilities of the tool. I think when we were looking at it, it was having some technical errors, so we couldn't really try it out. But we definitely want to try that out in the future.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'll put that. I'll find out more about that. We'll put that in the show notes, at least for people to check out. I'm guessing it was like a research from McGill.
Yeah, it was like a research project.
Okay. Cool. Paper or digital when it comes to organization for students with ADHD?
I think it definitely depends on the case. And like I said, as we're going to talk more about the SET framework, what's right for that specific student. There may be students that digital doesn't work for. Maybe it's, the interface is maybe too complex for that student, or, how could you change a paper-based or digital-based to aid in that, if complexity is an issue for the specific tool. So I do think it's really case-by-case basis.
Cool. Last one. One word to describe the future of AAC in education.
One word. Ooh. Collaborative.
Ooh, I like it. Cool. All right. So now we're going to talk about, and you've mentioned a little bit, the SET framework and how that kind of relates to AAC in general, right? And so can you give us like a brief overview who came up with the SET framework, what it means? I know we talked about it in our game in our first episode, but let's do a deeper dive today. So what is the SET framework? Who came up with it? Why do we even use it, or what is it even used for?
Yeah, so the SET framework was developed by Joy Zabala, and it really aims to provide a framework for, looking at basically the whole situation that the student, so we'll go into what it stands for.
Yeah, let's do that, yeah.
So it stands for student environment. Student is the S, environment, E. Then we have task, and then the tool last. So the tool is last because a lot of times people will kind of just jump to recommending a tool that they're familiar with and not looking at the whole picture.
Right.
And when you think about the student, if you think about that in relation to AAC specifically, You're looking at what communication functions does the student use? What do they have any sensory needs? What what are their preferences? What are their interests? What are their strengths and weaknesses? And really looking at that student as a whole, and student first, and then moving on to that environment. What environments are they communicating in? It's not just their classroom. Nope. They go home. They communicate with their family. They might have, other caregivers like babysitters, friends, cousins. And you can think about in these environments, the knowledge and training that the communication partners have, like how does that affect the communication in the environments?
Right. And I the one thing I like to always go back to is that it's not just like for communication in, you said this, just the classroom, right? This is like, we're teaching them how to communicate everywhere, whether they're in a department store or they're at
their
home.
Community.
Right.
In the gym,
right.
in the art room,
right.
on the bus.
Right.
Yeah.
So this communication has to, at least in the terms of AAC, has to work everywhere. And it's not, and I think sometimes we get lost like, oh, it's just for one single purpose. And I that's even with any AT, we almost pigeonhole it sometimes. It's one single purpose. But no, can it be used in other instances? And AAC obviously is used everywhere. But
right. And even like I was saying before about having those light tech backups for the student. If you think about, a student on the bus who might have a wheelchair with a mount, for safety reasons, that mount has to be collapsed and, the device might not be able to be used on the bus for safety reasons. Having that bus para, that aid, having a light tech version to help that student communicate on the bus, because like we said, communication does not end at any specific point. If you think about you and I, we communicate in lots of different environments throughout the day, lots of different functions. We have to think about our students in that capacity as well.
Cool. And then next is task. What's task?
Yeah. So, if you're thinking about what do you want to do with this specific, at the end of the day, the tool, but what are you trying to accomplish? So with AAC, you can think about communication, right? And thinking about those previous steps that you went through as well as you're thinking about task, So you're thinking about the task, but you're also thinking about, where does that task, what environments does that task occur in?
Yep.
And, the student as the foundation in the first part.
Cool. And we can see as we're going through each one of these, student, environment, task, how interrelated and how important it is to connect each one to each other. I think I talked about it. I almost feel it like outwards, inwards. But like you think about the student, you think about the environment, you think about the task. They're not separate, right? They're intertwined and intertangled, and you need to make sure you know that going into thinking about this set, whether it's for AAC or AT or whatever it's for, right? And then the last one we get to is tool, right? So what's the tool?
Right. So, now that you've built this, as this metaphorical house, like with the foundation as the student, the environment, the task, now you get to the tool after you have all that information, compiled, and, you're thinking about the features of the tool that would need to be to help fulfill the task, to help fulfill the task in the environments, to help support the student. So one builds off of another, like we were saying, thinking about how you're going to go about obtaining the tool, how you're going to train people on how to help facilitate communication. As we're talking about AAC specifically, what are any access barriers to consider, right? So thinking about, and I think access is something like, yes, it falls in this area, but we can think about it throughout. You're thinking about it with the student because you're thinking about the student's strengths and weaknesses. Maybe the student has, a physical disability and they have trouble moving their arms or isolating their finger. So you can think about access there as well. So I think access kind of falls
right
throughout this framework as well.
Right. And so when you're considering AAC, what are some tools you use to consider when you're thinking about the student? What are some tools? What are some Because like I know one that I know of, which is the communication matrix, right? And I'll make sure I put the information this in the show notes just so people can check this out. Like, what are some tools you use, and what is the communication matrix? What's that?
Yeah, so the communication matrix is a great tool to use. A lot of standardized assessments are not normed on the population that we might be evaluating. That's really important to consider because if you're reporting information using a tool, you want it to reflect. You want the assessment tool to reflect the population or the student that you're evaluating.
Right.
So with the communication matrix, you look at the student's skills and you see where they fall kind of in this visual, matrix of different skills. And you see where most of their skills fall. And they can also have scattered skills. So they can have skills that are maybe in the step that's below, emergent skills in a step that's above. So I think that that's really great because it doesn't just kind of box the student into one area. It shows where they might be emerging or they might have scattered skills in different areas. So I think that's a great tool to use with students who have complex communication needs. Also the DAG-3 made by Toby Dynavox.
I've never heard that one. What is that one?
So this is, a tool, it kind of similar, like shows where students fall, like what type of communicator they are, based on lots of different areas. There's a social area, there's an operational area, and really seeing how, what's unique about the DAG is it, based on where the student falls, it has goals that correspond with that, those areas, so that it doesn't kind of just end there. It can show you like what to get to the next level, what goals you might want to implement to help support the student on their, communication journey.
Question is, so I know the communication matrix is free. Is DAG free as well?
I believe so,
3?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's downloadable on Toby Dynavox's website.
Okay. And then is there a third? There's a third one, functional communication profile. What's that?
Yeah, so I haven't used that one as much as I've used the communication matrix and the DAG. Kind of just similar, seeing where, identifying those skill areas in like a similar way.
Cool. I also think of, so I know there's standalone devices, right? Toby Dynavox. Another one I just worked on is slipping my mind. I can't think of the name of it. But then you can actually have them right on your iPad or your iPhone too, right? So one I know of is Proluquo to Go. And there's also Proluquo, which we talked about. Proluquo to Go is usually a one-time purchase. And then Proluquo is a subscription-based model. And these are AAC apps. What is Proluquo, or can you give me some other apps or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so based on my experience, I've found that Proluquo to Go and TouchChat are kind of the most widely used among school districts. But there are a lot of other apps at your fingertips, and so Proluquo to Go is a software made by Assistiveware, and it's categorically organized. So it has a core page. It has a lot of core vocabulary on the main page, and then it has categories on the bottom, like little folders that you can go to. And some of that core follows you to those pages. And not to get too in the weeds, but it is organized with a motor plan in mind in regards to those accessory pages. So those core words that are on the main page, when you go to another page, they will stay in the same place.
Okay. So you're talking a little about motor plan. And the way I think I understand motor plan is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when you go into these different folders, on the page, there are new buttons, but there's also the same buttons in the same spot every single time. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So again, like these categories that you might go into. So for example, say I don't know, you go into a time page. So this has months of the year, seasons, days of the week, stuff like that. But it's going to have your words like want, like, more, all done. It's going to have some pronouns like I, you, me. So those are there so that you can use those and build sentences and without having to go back to that homepage.
Cool. And then so we have a couple different apps. What's the difference between Proloquoser Go or Touch Chat? Is there really major differences in them, or are they very similar? One's just one brand, one's another. There's LAMP, there's TD Snap. Like, is there a difference between all of those, or?
Yeah, so there's lots of different things that go into all these different apps. You have the symbols themselves. Some symbols are made with this thing called symbol sticks. So those are like the little stick figure guys. Some are like picture communication symbols, which is what Tobii Dynavox uses for their apps, like TD Snap, their PageSet Core First. You have different layouts. I was talking about motor planning. So something that might be considered like a high motor plan is LAMP. So LAMP stands for Language Acquisition Through Motor Plan. So the whole software is based in a motor plan. We could kind of in another whole episode talk about what the symbols themselves mean, because LAMP is based on a symbol set called MinSpeak, which I think dates back to the 70s or 80s, something like that. But their thing with LAMP is motor planning. So things remain in the same place throughout different pages.
Cool.
And I was talking about the organization. So LAMP is organized semantically. So their folders have, it's organized by the meaning of the symbols. So again, I could go into that a different time, but these different programs are organized differently. Something like Touch Chat, you might consider that like a medium motor plan because it has, you'll have a word that you select and it might pop up kind of like a predictive word next to it. Like, for example, on the homepage, you can say open and then next to it will pop up the door. So predicting what someone might most often use the word open with.
Cool.
But doesn't necessarily box you into saying that, of course. But
what about TD Snap?
So TD Snap is an app made by Tobii Dynavox, and they have different page sets available. Their kind of most used page set is called Core First. I would say that it's categorically organized, but kind of has those same principles as something like Proloquoser Go, where it has that core vocab that follows you from different pages, but has a lot of fringe vocab as well. Okay. What's unique about TD Snap is with Core First is they have a quick fires page. So quick fires is their lingo for like kind of a social pragmatic language. So I know what's cool about TD Snap is they have also this thing online called PageSet Central, where you can download page sets made by other people onto your device. So maybe they have a page that someone made that's all about Bluey.
Okay. Or music or...
Yeah, so it kind of saves you that time, and you can further customize that once you put that on the student's device. But I really like that feature. I think it you can see what other people are doing. You can take their template and make it more customized to what the student wants or needs, and saves you time. Like if you're thinking about how much time educators, SLPs do not have in the school setting, it's a great feature. And I feel like all of these companies should have something like that.
So the other apps, that's the only app or program that you know of that has like a user created.
I'm familiar with, yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I'm all for being able to speed up my time if I'm working on something.
Right.
Pull information right from, that's really cool. Cool. Good. So Is there anything else that we want to talk about with AAC and SET?
Oh, you know what? I mean, I could add, because I was just talking about TD Snap.
Yes.
If, anyone in the school district is familiar with a software called BoardMaker. So BoardMaker is a software also made by Tobii Dynavox. And this is like a separate license, and it's basically a place where you can make lots of accessible educational materials using symbols. And this is great because it can be used by paras, it can be used by educators, it can be used by SLPs, and it can really help carry over that use of symbols to communicate into the classroom. You can make board games on there, you can make visual schedules on there. It's really a great resource for a district to have.
Cool. All right. Thank you. This was really, there was a lot of information here. And I think we've talked about this before. You guys just had a whole AAC series on introduction to what AAC is. It's like 5 or 6 videos on the YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. So those are all available on our YouTube channel. You can watch them, whenever you would like to. Our presenter, Sarah Brown, is also an AAC specialist, and she shares a lot of valuable information throughout the series that is, very topic specific. We have 6 episodes of that, ranging from an introduction to AAC all the way to how to obtain different types of AAC.
Cool. And so that actually, in a future episode, we're going to have a friend of yours used to work with, her name's Molly, right? And she's an AAC specialist, an SLP, an AAC specialist as well. But she's going to talk about when the transition piece, right? AAC from 18, 19, 20, 21 to adulthood, right?
Yeah. So a lot of my experience is with, elementary and middle school age children. And she has a lot of specialized experience with that transition population. So those high school age students who are maybe transitioning out of the school system at 21, and how to carry over those different assistive technologies and AAC tools into their life, and how to continue making their life as as accessible and increasing their independence across different environments. So.
And we're also going to have a couple upcoming episodes on AT and blind and visually impaired and things like that. You also have in the AT Summit. We keep talking about this. The AT Summit with DR Disability Rights New Jersey on October 7th, right? So yeah. So we're gonna try something today. Vanessa's not here, but I want to play a game with her. So we're both going to clap at the same time, and she's magically going to appear.
Okay.
Do you think you can do it?
Yeah.
So on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh! It's good to see you.
Hey guys, how are ya?
Good. Oh, good. How are you? I forgot to let me turn your mic on. Can we hear you? Now speak again.
Sure. Hi. How are you both?
Good.
Oh, nice
How was
to
your
see
trip
you.
through the portal?
Through time and space.
Time
It
and
was
space.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so we have a game today. We're going to call it Set It Straight. And I even have a little jingle like I always do. Let's hear it. I'm going to put it on.
S-E-T-T is straight. S-E-T-T is straight. S-E-T-T is straight.
So the game is set framework, Set It Straight. So we've been talking a lot about this framework today. It helps guide the conversation around assistive technology. The rules are simple. I'm going to read a series of technology statements that you hear during an AT evaluation or IEP meeting. And your job is to identify which part of the SET framework that question falls under. So student, environment, task, or tools, right? Okay. Task or tools. So here's the question number 1. Oh.
Buzzers.
Right. Yes, you're right. You want, let's see.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It's okay.
Right, here you go. So you get that one, and you get that one.
All right.
Good. Thank you for the buzzers. I forgot about them. What are the students' specific strengths, interests, and preferences? Vanessa.
Student.
Perfect. That's 1 point to Vanessa.
All right.
Okay. What are the specific activities the student needs to accomplish to meet their educational goals? Madison.
Activities. Oh, wait. I was thinking about this. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What are the specific
Did you just press the buzzer? That's it.
What are the specific activities the student needs to accomplish to meet their educational goals?
Oh, the task.
Perfect. Next question. So that's 1-1. What assistive technology program or software are currently available and accessible in the district?
The tools.
Good. Vanessa. That's 2-1, Vanessa. Question number 4. Who are the primary communication partners in the classroom, and what is their comfort level with technology? Madison.
Environment.
Got it. That's 2-2. This is heating up.
It's a nail biter.
Oh my gosh. Question number 5. How does a student currently communicate their wants and needs?
Student.
Perfect. Now it's 3-2. Vanessa,
right.
she's leaving in the dust. Are there any specific access barriers we need to consider for the student to use these devices?
The environment.
Not the environment.
The tool.
I was gonna say tool for that one.
Okay.
You run the podcast.
Okay, all right, all right.
You decide what it is.
I guess that, now I'm
Nobody
thinking about
gets
it.
that. I took too long to answer.
But not just that. Are there any specific barriers? I'm rethinking this one.
Well, I think we were talking about before how access should be considered
Transcends.
throughout all of the SETT.
Yes. Yeah. So
I
are
mean,
there?
at least that's my interpretation.
Yeah.
And,
So
and how I approach things.
I agree. Are there any specific access barriers we need to consider for the student to use these devices? So environment or tools. Actually, I would say one or the other. So I'll give can I give a point? Can I give a half a point to both of you?
Sure.
You could do whatever you want. You're running the podcast.
So it's 3.5 to 2.5, I think.
That's right.
Right? Okay. What are the instructional arrangements in the classroom? Is it mostly whole group instruction, small groups, or independent work?
The
Vanessa.
task.
Yes. Good. What exactly is preventing the student from being able to complete the assignment independently?
the task?
Yes. Good. Okay. So I didn't, that's 4.5
to
5.5. There we go. 4.5 to 5.5. Does a student have any sensory factors that might affect their ability to use a particular device or stay focused in class?
Student.
Got it. So that's 6.5.
Ooh.
I don't think this is the last question coming up. I think, unfortunately, Madison has already won it. But
Bottom of the ninth.
what kind of training and ongoing support will be necessary for the student and the staff to use these solutions successfully?
I pressed it, but it didn't,
It didn't.
go.
It's okay.
The tool.
Good. Perfect. I love it. You guys did great. Madison won. Did Madison win last time? I can't remember.
I think so.
I think Madison might have.
think so.
Uh-oh. So
You know,
job,
I do like to play video games, so maybe we'll brush it up to that.
cool.
Trigger
So,
happy.
Thanks for tuning. Thank you for flying in, Vanessa.
Sure.
That was great.
Happy
Coming through
to.
time and space. And Madison, thank you for everything you told us about AAC today and opening our minds. And it was very interesting. And
Of course, let's continue the conversation for sure.
yes.
And looking forward to having Molly on the podcast to talk more about that transition piece for sure.
Cool. And that's a wrap on another episode of AT Talks. A huge thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. We love making this podcast and building this community with all of you. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. The team at the Assistive Technology Center at TCNJ is dedicated to supporting educators across New Jersey. If you are inspired by today's discussion and want to bring high-quality, free professional development to your district, Vanessa and Madison are ready to help. To learn how you can partner with the center and build capacity in your school, head over to our website. You can find all the information you need at atcenter.tcnj.edu. And while you're there, we want to hear from you. Visit the podcast tab. There you can send us a question through our Google form, or even better, leave us a voice message on SpeakPipe for us to play live on the show. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay up to date on all our latest events and resources. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube with the handle at ATCenterTCNJ. And don't forget to subscribe to AT Talks on whatever platform you're listening on right now so you never miss an episode. On behalf of Vanessa, Madison, and myself, Brian, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.